Good afternoon, and welcome to another Conversations with Amoda Maa. Today we're going to be talking about peace in the midst of life. I'm going to be exploring with Amoda peace not as the absence of disturbance, but as the deeper ground of being that remains untouched in the midst of human experience. Rather than seeking peace through control, escape, or ideal conditions, the invitation is to discover the peace that is already here beneath resistance, fear, and the movement of the separate self. So I've got a number of possible questions, and we'll see if we can get through any of these and dive a bit deeper into the issue, which in many ways is the issue of our times, certainly the prevailing issue for many spiritual seekers. So, Amoda, welcome.
Thank you.
Let me jump right in and ask you this pivotal question. What is the difference between peace as a feeling and peace as the ground of being?
Well, commonly we associate peace with a feeling, the feeling of calm, or the feeling of a kind of happiness or stillness, certainly a feeling of being undisturbed. But the deeper ground of being is neither a feeling nor an emotion. It's beyond being disturbed or not disturbed. So I guess we could say it's like the ocean. The deeper ground of being is the ocean. That in the deep, it's not a matter of disturbed or undisturbed. That's only on the surface or the periphery. So really to know true peace, we must know the ocean. We must be the ocean, which is not to associate peace with a particular feeling or emotion, but to discover what remains undisturbed in all things, what remains as when all disturbances come and go, when all feelings come and go.
Am I right in assuming then that peace is not something that we seek in the way that you're talking about it?
It's not something we manufacture. It's not, in other words, it's not something that is dependent on circumstances. Neither is it a state of mind or a state of, it's not about managing our emotions or managing our thoughts. In that sense, it's not something that we seek to create. We can seek the deeper ground of being, which is a whole different question. It's a different inquiry. Instead of seeking peace in the periphery of our experience, we seek to understand or recognize the deeper dimension of peace and what that means, or not what that means to us intellectually, but what that discovery reveals.
Is that peace comes with a lot of conceptual baggage and a lot of desire and a lot of imagination, but also a lot of goodness within it, good, honest seeking. Are those kind of qualities, or are they things that we need to throw away in our search for what you just said is the deeper ground of being, or are they interwoven?
I don't think we should throw out the qualities of peace as a genuine longing. I think the desire for peace, whether it's peace in our own lives or peace in the world, is a genuine desire. It's a good desire, if you like. Of course, we want peace. We want the end of conflict, the end of anxiety, the end of division in the world. These are all noble desires, of course. So it's not about throwing that away, but it is about realizing that all our attempts to create peace or to become peaceful in ourselves are coming from the separate self that believes it can do something. On a personal level, that doing is about controlling our thoughts, controlling our emotions, following certain practices or techniques so that we become more peaceful. And with that often comes the image of what a peaceful person looks like, acts like, and then we're simply reinforcing the separate self, and we can't maintain that. So often it will flip. There's a lot of effort in maintaining a peaceful aura, a peaceful mask, if you like, a peaceful persona. It's the same if we're seeking to create peace in the world. If we're coming from a place of inner division, it's not going to have a lasting or potent impact. So whilst these are noble concerns and noble movements of the self, whether they're internal or external, at some point, a deeper discovery is invited. What is the peace that passeth all understanding? What is the peace that has no image to it? What is the peace that remains, whether on the surface we are disturbed or not disturbed? Whether there is, what is a deeper dimension of peace? How can we know that? Is that possible? And what impact does that have on our lives and on the world? It's just a different question. It's a question that invites us to turn within. What is beyond or prior to the movement of the self that wants to create peace? Because that's where the deeper dimension of peace is. And I am pointing here to the peace of being. Can we know being rather than trying to create a peaceful persona?
Because discovering the ground of being is implicitly peaceful. I don't mean peaceful conceptually. I mean peace as in terms of, you know, the trouble is that when the mind thinks of peace, it tends to think of peace in opposition to war or in opposition to division. And so then immediately we take that with us everywhere and would seek to only discover peace in the absence of those other qualities, those other separate things. And so what you're saying is something actually really quite different. And that's where the peace that passeth understanding actually points to. Am I right?
Yes, the peace of being, the discovery of being, which is, we could symbolically or metaphorically liken that to the ocean, the depth of the ocean, is inherently at peace in the sense of it's the end of resistance to what is. If we apply that to the attempt to be peaceful, in other words, to get rid of uncomfortable thoughts or negative thoughts, or get rid of anxiety, or get rid of intense emotion, because that's not a peaceful emotion, then when we're actually still in a state of inner division, we're resisting what is. We're applying resistance and the effort of the self to control and manage what is. Yes, I'm just talking about our internal experience first. That in itself is not peace. That in itself is conflict. That in itself is division. That in itself is violence towards what is. So to really know peace, to really allow the peace of being, because being is inherently peace, to filter into our human experience and into the world, we have to end all inner resistance, all inner war, all inner argument. That's the first place. And that's not the first place that most people go to. Yeah. But if we can end resistance within, then inherently we are at peace with what is. Whether the mind labels it as unwelcome or too difficult or too intense or so on, we are in a peaceful situation within, deep, deep, dim. It's the end of resistance. And it's only from that place that we can start to know the peace of being. And that has an impact on our experience.
Okay, yes, I concur. I hear you completely. Does it so, the world is divided, let's say. Not all of it, but there's a lot of division rubbed in our faces, and we all know that. Many people's immediate lives also have elements of division within them, yeah. And most people, because most people are conditioned, also have this within themselves. Is there any benefit for, seeking or managing or waiting for conditions to be right, or to withdraw from the world to find the monastery or the cave, or to, disappear into a shack in a cabin in the woods to find that peace within?
No, because
Well, thanks for your honest answer.
I'll expand on it a little bit. Ultimately, no. Temporarily, maybe yes. But ultimately, that peace must be known in all conditions, in all circumstances. Withdrawal into a peaceful situation is a postponement of knowing the true peace. So yes, it may be valuable for a time in order to even discover that deeper dimension of peace, inner peace. But it's likely to become dependent on those conditions, the conditions of external silence, the conditions of withdrawal from the world. We can't postpone peace. As long as it's dependent on any circumstance, then we do not know peace. Yeah. We must go beyond or transmute inner division in order to live as peace anywhere, anytime. Okay. Otherwise, conflict continues to perpetuate itself.
So, as you said, let's actually get a little bit deeper in many ways. You do use, and you have often used, the phrase the biblical phrase, I think, attributed to whoever Jesus was, of the peace that passeth understanding. Now, the peace that passeth understanding, when you open it up, really is actually saying to the modern spiritual seeker, peace beyond divided mind of thought. I think that's what it is suggesting. So can you just, because this is not really about the world, this is about going back to what we keep going back to in this conversation already, which is a peace beyond understanding, which is mental chatter and thought. Just speak a bit about that, what that really means. And I know we keep talking about it, but I think you just need to make it clearer and clearer and, deeper and deeper in many ways.
It cannot be known by the mind. It cannot be known by the acquisitive mind. Mind is always acquisitive, at least the mind that is a function of the separate self, the ego identity, the me self, call it what you will. That, if you like, limited bandwidth of mind, which is the default position, is always acquisitive. It wants to, it believes it is the doer. It wants to find a way, a method, a practice, a philosophical or intellectual understanding of how to create peace or how to be peaceful. So the peace that passeth all understanding cannot be a function, cannot be known, cannot be possessed, cannot be created by that narrow bandwidth of mind that is a product, if you like, of the me identity, the ego identity. It can only be known when the me identity, the ego identity, the separate self has come undone, at least to some degree. And it can only come undone when we end in a resistance. And then it's not known by the mind, it's not created by the mind, and it doesn't have a picture that's associated with the mind. It's known as the fundamental nature of self, with a capital S, if you like. True self. It's known as true nature. It's known as the fundamental being that is prior to thought, to feeling, to emotion, to circumstance. It's our essential nature. So it really is about waking up out of the dream of the separate self. Without that, there can be no transformation, transmutation, revolution of consciousness that ends in a division.
Jesus then was pointing to enlightenment.
Absolutely. This is it. The light within, not the light that is opposed or separate or different from, or to what we might call the dark, or it's not in opposition to anything. The light within is the knowing of our innate nature as that which is prior to any appearance, which is enlightenment. It is the undoing of the identification with a sense of a separate me. Until we as individuals or humanity as a collective have realized this, there will be no true peace on the level of circumstances or conditions. But first we must know this within. So then we don't operate, we don't act from inner division. There's a silence, or there's a pause, or there's a quietness, an inner quietness prior to reaction, prior to taking action even. This is not something, again, that we impose upon ourselves. It's a natural unfoldment that takes place. That doesn't mean we're perfect. There are times where intense emotion may arise, but we have the capacity to meet reality from a deeper ground. I mean, even an enlightened person can get angry. Yeah, and so on and so on. You know, the human movement of energy still continues, but we are less likely, or more appropriately, not following that movement of energy. We're not identifying it and becoming that. So that has real impact on our lives, not from a place of control or imposing anything upon ourselves, but from moving in the world from that inner openness or quietness, if you like. Again, it's not about the persona, it's from within. The very quality of the light of being is open. It has an openness. It hasn't got a tight fist of resistance in it.
The word that you just used a minute ago was quietness, and I think that is a very evocative word to use in this that you're describing, because it says something. It says that, I mean, everybody would know that the capacity that we have of quietness in the storm, for instance, which is the same as what you're saying about peace in that passeth understanding, but a kind of quietness that doesn't need everything to be quiet is the same as the peace that doesn't need everything to be peaceful.
That's right. Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. It's not that we just shut up and don't say anything. It's not that we don't take action where action is needed. But that which moves in us moves from inner quietness. It doesn't move from belief or opinion or the structure of the self that is created out of our conditioned patterns and beliefs. That's where the noise is, if you like. That's where the tension is. It moves from that which is prior to it. So in that sense, it is imbued or infused with the light or the quietness, even though the action may be, you know, a very obvious action. Clear. So it's like action or expression has a clarity in it. It has a directness in it. It has a compassion in it. But again, we have to be careful with all those words, because when they're understood by the self, they become ways of speaking or ways of acting that have a moral, ethical, spiritual veneer to them. This is much more fresh than that.
Sweet, that's beautiful. Can now I hear you talking about the inquiry into oneself. Yeah, that you're inviting. Who am I? Yeah, to go deeper to the ground of being. And I see you talking about that as being essential on the path, even in a way prior to this notion of peace, because you can't really have fundamental peace without knowing the ground of being within yourself. However, many people get really hooked up on the search for enlightenment, and it keeps the carrot dangling up ahead. And in a way, the search for peace can be exactly the same thing. Yeah, the search for peace. That I'm not feeling peaceful. I'm not feeling peaceful, even though we've talked about the feeling of peaceful, which is not really it. What I'm getting to is the cultivation of peace. I know you're not particularly practice friendly, and we're not talking about what practices one can do, but cultivation is a different thing from practices. How can people who are listening kind of cultivate something that which you're pointing to?
By ending inner resistance.
And how are people? How is that? Not how in the what technique do I use, but what's the doorway? What's the fragrance? What's the ongoing inquiry? What's the ongoing day-to-day sort of cultivation of a deeper relationship, rather than waiting for the grand moment?
Yes. In every circumstance of our lives, we have two possibilities. One is to meet it with a certain resistance, a certain argument. This shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't be feeling like this, and so on, which sets up the whole craving and aversion cycle. Or we can meet it as it is. One way, the argument creates tension. It creates an inner tension that is either obvious or not so obvious. It creates a tension in the mind, a grasping of the mind, a push and pull, the craving and aversion of the mind. It creates physical tension in the nervous system, a certain agitation or restlessness, which may not be immediately obvious, although it can be very obvious, or over time it becomes obvious, or something that we just get so accustomed to, but carry as a kind of tension somewhere in the physiology, in the nervous system. It can create reactivity. Mm-hmm. It creates the argument creates a turbulence in the emotional field. And a suppression in the emotional field where certain emotions are unacceptable. So we suppress them, deny them, run away from them, and so on. So here we are caught in a state of division. That's one option. The other option, because we are feeling, sensing organisms, is to sense, to become aware of our natural sensitivity to that tension, and to choose, if choice is the right word, it's not really, but it's a kind of willingness to simply soften the argument. We can go through the mental. If there's a narrative that says this shouldn't be happening, well, it is happening. In the very moment that it's happening, to say this shouldn't be happening is insanity, because it is happening. To say I shouldn't be feeling this, but you are feeling this, is insanity. So to undo that, to see that it's insanity, that is the narrative is insanity, and to come back to sanity, and to at least on a mental level accept that what is happening, and it's okay. Feelings do not kill you. Yeah. Then on an emotional level and an energetic level and a physical level, the system starts to soften. What if it's really okay that this is here? And we don't give allegiance to the narratives. Each of us has that capacity. For some people, that's obviously very difficult. But over time, and for those who are willing, there is this possibility. One is hell, the other one is freedom and the deeper dimension of peace. And this is something that is an ongoing invitation by life. until we come to know and trust that it's actually okay. Life is always unfolding with all its waviness, with all its turbulence, with all its emotional depth and breadth and so on, but it's okay. I am still here. I am. And in this way, we start to deepen into the I am, which is the presence of being, the light of being, the peace of being. Now, this isn't a method. It's not but it is an ongoing living inquiry. I prefer the word inquiry rather than practice. Am I willing in this moment to simply open to what is? And to experiment with that. We're so afraid. Most people are so afraid of even beginning to open. Why not experiment? What is there to lose?
I think you've opened it up. I think that's a very sweet, very true explanation. And that's the cultivation that I mean. We cultivate. There has to be, to a degree, either before, during, or after this thing called awakening. There is still a cultivation that goes on. If it's after awakening, then it's cultivating into how it is lived in the human life. But even before that, there is a cultivation, and I think that's what you're talking about. The cultivation is not just a mental thing; it's a willingness. It is a willingness. That's what you're pointing to.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that you, in a nutshell, peace then is the absence of resistance to what is. And we're really talking mainly about the inner world here. Yeah. I know it's to do with the outside world as well, but it gets complex when we meet the outside world, because there's huge injustice, wars that shouldn't happen, immense cruelty, and so this is a way of drawing it back to ourselves, essentially. Is that accurate?
Yes. If there is to be right action in the world, it must come from this inner peace, this inner end of the division. First, it must end here. Then we take action where it's relevant, where it's intelligent. Yeah? The external reflection of the world as a place of division or violence or war is really a reflection, a reflection of the collective field of the majority of humanity operating from inner division. Now, adding more division to that is not going to stop it. It may have a temporary effect, a very temporary effect, but it still goes on. I mean, history, for as far as we know it, has shown that. No amount of fighting for peace, no amount of campaigning and so on actually has a long-term impact. We are not, as a species, ready, if you like, for that external peace to be manifest. So we must look within first. I have a certain faith that the external will eventually change. Most of us won't be here to see it, but we must begin within. There's no other way. State of consciousness must change. And that's not to do with believing in peaceful things or taking sides or opposition in any way, even if one is standing up for Standing up for peace.
Can I ask a question that some would call the devil's advocate question, which is a dual question, really. One, which is when people, if there's incredible suffering and a kind of wrongness in the world, and I use that term kind of hesitant, cautiously, then isn't the seeking of peace within when one should be doing something in the world socially, an abdication of a social responsibility and actually a selfish move is one question. And the second question is, from this peaceful place, or this ground of being, one still sees with your eyes the suffering of the world. What happens to the heart in this? I mean, this is an important question. Isn't there a certain heartbreak, and doesn't that heartbreak then divide us? So I've got to. I'm afraid I've thrown two questions at you.
First of all, the realization of true peace within is not selfish. Not at all. It appears that way. Perhaps if these words or this lands upon a separate self who can only see from that perspective, then it may appear selfish. But this has nothing to do with my peaceful life. This has nothing to do with the me self protecting itself from anything and cultivating a pseudo-spiritual or peaceful state where nothing can disturb me. It's not selfish, not at all. This is about the undoing of the self. This is selfless. Yeah. From this place, yes, our heart is broken open by the suffering of the world. Absolutely. But that breaking open is not to divide us even more so that we can rail or argue or be loud about it. It's for us to move as peace in the world. And one person cannot save the whole of the world and its suffering. So it breaks our hearts. But in that, we move as peace, we move as compassion in our inner and immediate environment. That's the only place it can start. And if there is a suffering situation in one's environment, one tends to it. One tends to it with kindness and humility and grace. And that's where it starts. We don't create harm in our close environment, whether that's to do with our families or our children or our pets, and it moves from there. But we can't, to project out into something that isn't actually in our capacity to tend to is simply a way of the self, the separate self, feeling better about itself because it's standing up for something. So we have to navigate this truthfully and honestly so that our hearts break open, but we don't end up in an even more divided state.
Yeah. I have noticed in the work that we do, for instance, and certainly since I've fallen into a deeper peace and equanimity way of being in the world that is actually harmonious within myself, and the sort of impact of the work that we do on people genuinely, it may seem small, it may seem inconsequential to many, but in many ways it's got such an essence of peace within it, because most human beings actually, despite what we're presented with, do want peace. They do want the end of suffering. They do want the end of the inner war within themselves. And no amount of warring that we writ large in the world is actually ever going to really achieve that. So something else always has to happen.
Yes.
So I think we explored that. And my feeling is we should close this conversation, but I'd like you to end with a simple kind of invitation to pause, to go within, to feel something within this moment, because people are listening in all sorts of situations, in the car, at home, and in work. You know, is there any peace here now? Because everybody's listening with the mind, but there's something else here as well. So maybe we could just end with a 3 or 4 minute invitation from you to explore that a little bit.
Well, we can notice wherever we are, whatever circumstance, whether you're standing, sitting, driving, you don't have to close your eyes, but you can be in touch with the inner energetic field. Are you operating from an inner argument in any way? Are you reaching towards a future moment, the next moment, in the hope that it'll be more comfortable or more peaceful or more pleasant? Are you really able to just be here? Wherever you are, whatever is appearing in your field. If your eyes are closed, then what appears may be a sort of emotional field or a sensation or a memory or a thought. If you're driving or walking, there will be shapes and objects and the perception of space, time, space, distance. But are you able to simply be here? To meet what is with an inner quietness and not with a loud narrative. This shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be feeling like this. Are you moving away from this right here? Are you able to rest within and simply move or drive or sit without any attempt to change or fix or control what is here? Can you be at peace with what is? Are you willing to stop postponing peace for the next moment, the next situation, when you're feeling better or when circumstances are in your favor? Don't postpone peace. Postponing of peace in this way postpones peace in the world.
It's a kind of presence, really, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Sort of nothing. Sort of open nothing.
When the self stops doing anything, the internal self, the sense of self. Even if there is turbulence, even if there are thoughts, you don't try and stop anything. You don't stop the movement of life or energy. It'll move by itself whether you try to stop it or not. There's nothing to do. Then life moves in a more graceful, intelligent way. It moves as love, not as war.
Yeah. There's there's a relaxation of the entire organism. The whole organism relaxes, and that's such a boon to the human condition, because then it moves.
Don't be concerned for peace tomorrow. Only now. Yeah? All the tomorrows will eventually take care of themselves.
There's a lot to be said for that wisdom. Yeah. Okay, much as I would like to actually sit here for a very long time and just without anything, I think we have to draw this to a close, sadly. So thank you so much, Amoda, for your eloquence, and thank you everyone for watching and listening to another Conversations with Amoda Maa. We look forward to seeing you soon. Don't forget to share and like and subscribe and give a heads up to this, and do check out the website where you'll find us offering events both in person and online. And we look forward to maybe meeting you in the flesh, if not as a head online. And until then, be well. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Amoda. Namaste.
Thank you, Kavi.
Namaste.
Namaste.